Chapter 1540. Even if Ning Xuemo was at her peak, she wouldn't be able to survive such a lightning tribulation, let alone the weak Ning Xuemo now. Momo! Another shout came from afar, and a red figure flew over from the sky. It was Shuailan, and Rong Yuetian was following behind him. When the two of them saw the scene in front of them, their expressions changed. Shuailan rushed into the golden light without hesitation. Momo! Bang! He crashed directly into the golden light and was rebounded violently, almost causing him to fall off the cloud. He quickly steadied himself and looked at Ning Xuemo, who was shrouded in the golden light. His eyes were red. He rushed in recklessly. Momo, let me go in and block the lightning for you. When anyone was going through a lightning tribulation, the light would only cover the person going through the tribulation. If others wanted to block the lightning for him or her, they had to get the approval of the person going through the tribulation. In other words, whether it was Shinjiuli or Shuailan, if they wanted to block the lightning for Ning Xuemo, they had to get Ning Xuemo's approval. At this moment, the golden lightning with a hint of red was about to strike. Ning Xuemo's red dress was shrouded in it. She closed her eyes slightly and looked up at the sky, not looking at the people outside at all. Ning Xuemo! Let me go in. You can't block this lightning. Shinjuli's palms pressed against the golden light, and he quickly said with a pale face. No matter how calm he was, at this moment, his hands were trembling. He was really scared. He had never been so scared. If he lost her now, it would be an eternal loss. If she couldn't survive the golden lightning tribulation, her soul would really be destroyed. Her soul would really disappear from the world, and no matter what he did, she would never come back. A huge panic engulfed him. If she didn't come back, if she disappeared just like that, then what was the use of him staying in this world? He was a god who thought that he was omnipotent, but now he couldn't even block the lightning tribulation for his woman. Ning Xuemo! You can't be so cruel. I know this is your best revenge, but I don't want this kind of revenge. He recklessly rammed into that damned golden light. Xuemo, listen to me. You've misunderstood me. I'm not engaged to Lizine. I'm only engaged with her because I owe her a favor. I'm blocking the lightning tribulation. I like you. Let me go in and block it. Xuemo, listen to me, Xuemo. It was the first time in his life. The first time in his life he was pleading with her. Unfortunately, the person in the golden light did not seem to hear his words. She only opened her arms and faced the sky. Her eyes were slightly closed, and her eyelashes were long. The expression on her face was very calm, as if she had finally completely let go, as if she was welcoming a grand destruction. That's it. It's to end. Chapter 1541. If he did not make a decision now, Ning Xuemo, who was enveloped by the golden light, would be struck by the lightning tribulation. Not only would her physical body be destroyed, even her soul would be destroyed. Thus, he had no choice but to attack forcefully. He only wanted to pull her out and protect her in his arms against the lightning tribulation. She might not be able to survive this time, but he could protect her soul. As long as her soul was still there, he could forcefully reverse the cycle of reincarnation and rebuild her body. Ning Xuemo, no matter what, you have to give me a chance. Give me a chance to redeem myself. Give me a chance to explain everything to you. The power of a god could destroy the heavens and earth. The palm wind that contained all the power of a god could not be described with mere words. The blazing white light collided with the golden light, and an extremely terrifying sound of collision rang out. It was truly earth-shattering. The surrounding trees were uprooted from the impact, and their leaves withered. Not far away, the pavilions and terraces collapsed from the impact, turning into countless pieces of rubble that flew into the air. This sound of collision was like a magnitude 8 earthquake. Even the ground beneath their feet was twisted and distorted. Although the martial arts of the Sun Moon sect disciples present were not weak, they were still unable to withstand such a frightening impact. Although everyone tried to defend themselves, they were still shaken into a mess. Those who were slightly weaker directly spat out blood from the impact. The unbreakable golden light finally cracked open under Shinjioli's fatal attack. Shinjioli was about to fly in. Boom! The golden light that surrounded Ning Xuemo suddenly exploded with a layer of bright red light. That red light instantly filled the gap that the golden light had just cracked open. Shinjioli's body collided with the red light, and he was once again stopped in his tracks. Almost at that instant, a thunderous sound rang out beside his ears. A bolt of golden lightning with hints of purple finally struck down. Ning Xuemo, who was within the golden light, did not have any intention of resisting at all. She was directly struck by that purplish golden lightning. Momo. Xuemo. The two figures pounced on the golden light in vain, but they were bounced away again. The golden lightning did not care if the person in the light resisted or not. Once it started, it would strike again and again at the petite figure in the golden light. The golden lightning illuminated the ground, and the brightness was not something that the human eye could accept. Furthermore, the sound of the tribulation thunder was not something that humans could withstand. It was so loud that it caused their ears to buzz. One after another, the sound of thunder exploded in their ears. Almost everyone subconsciously closed their eyes. He covered his ears. Some of the new disciples were so scared that they squatted on the ground, unable to stand up. This was probably the first time they had seen such a situation. Finally, the thunder that shook the sky came to an abrupt stop. Finally, the golden lightning disappeared. Finally, the golden clouds in the sky turned white again, as if nothing had happened. The golden light finally disappeared, but the person shrouded in the golden light also disappeared. There was not even a trace of her in the air, as if this person had never appeared in this world. The wind blew, and there was still the fragrance of grass and trees in the wind, but she no longer existed. Shinjioli stood in the same place blankly. His clothes, which were always neatly buttoned, were in a mess. His snow-white robe was stained with blood and mud, and it was almost impossible to see its original color. Embarrassing. For the first time in his life, the venerable sovereign, who was like a god, was in such a sorry state. All of his elegance seemed to have disappeared. He stared blankly at the place where the golden light had once been. It was as if the figure that he loved and hated was still there, as if she had not left. Chapter 1542. Countless memories whistled into his mind and converged into a vast ocean that practically drowned his entire consciousness. Ginseng baby. Come into my arms. When he first met her, she grabbed him like he was a ginseng baby. Jiuzun. That's a weird name. Are you trying to be like Dizun? He's an old man, you're not. Be good, be obedient. Would you believe me if I said I came from another time? The guns, cannons, and rocket launchers you saw in my dreams are all from my time. Han Shanhue, I don't have any grudges with you, right? Why are you scheming against me? Master Han, I knew you would come to save me. Great God, I'll call you Great God. In my time, Great God is a very powerful title, it's an honorific. Great God, come, let me tease you. Great God, what do you take me for? Don't tell me you want me to be your concubine. Let me tell you, although I like you, I will never be your concubine. Don't even think about it. Great God, why do you have to wait until Earth rank level 8 to tell me the answer? You're keeping me in suspense again. Forget it, I'll wait until I reach level 8, we're nothing now, you're not allowed to kiss me again, Great God, you should lose weight, you're so heavy, great God, moi. Great God, are you going to be gone for a long time? Okay, 10 days, I'll wait here for you to come back. I promise I'll be good, I won't run around. Wave after wave of memories surged through his mind like a tidal wave. It made his face even paler, his body even stiffer. Memories. All the memories about her were like seawater, every wave was floating with her figure, her voice, and her smile. She called him Great God, she liked him so much that even a blind person could see it. She was proud because he couldn't give her an answer to marry her, and she didn't want to be intimate with him. She was such a proud and carefree person. She had waited for him on the Tianyin Peak for a month. In the end, she was plotted against by Wu Mo and almost lost her life. She had been locked up by Shuilan for 10 years. After being rescued by him, she was so happy that she was about to explode. When she was in his arms, she clutched his clothes tightly. She looked like she was crying and laughing at the same time. She was laughing, but her eyes were red, she had always loved him. Like moths to a flame. He had asked her to wait for him for 10 days, but in the end, she had waited for 10 years. In the end, he would lose his memory and treat her as a stranger, only treating her as his disciple. In the end, he only remembered her previous life and confused her current life with her previous life. After recovering the memories of his past life, he had treated her as Shui Mo from the start. He had even suspected that she had come to his side for some unknown purpose. Shinjioli, I'm Ning Shuimo, not Shui Mo. Don't always put her dead on my head. Why do you always treat me as her? So what if she's my previous life? There's no need for me to always bear her debt, right? Why do you always treat me as her? I've said it before, I'm Ning Shuimo, not Shui Mo. She lived a carefree life and didn't want to be burdened by her previous life. But to her, the two men in her life both treated her as another woman and erased everything about Ning Shuimo. He only remembered everything about Shui Mo, so he always thought that she loved Shuilan. Chapter 1543. How could she know she was wrong? Everything was wrong. No matter if it was the previous life or this life, she loved him, always loved him. She had never loved anyone else. She desperately escaped from that black hole, desperately returned to this continent, just to return to his side, just to have a happy family of 3, but he gave her a slap in the face. I came to sincerely ask Ancestor for advice. Ancestor, do you really want to marry Miss Lizine? Indeed, it has nothing to do with me. It's me who asked. I wish Ancestor and Miss Lu to grow old together and be forever in love. Formed by the Pipe, and then scattered by the Pipe. Ancestor, the fate between you and me ends here. He slapped her, who had a miscarriage, away and left with another woman. Shinjioli, I hate you. You will regret it. Scenes of the past were as clear as yesterday, and all his memories came back. She was proud of herself, she was smiling, she was angry, she was happy, she was smiling. It turned out that even without the existence of the previous life, she had truly walked into his life. She was Ning Shuimo, not Shui Mo. She was a free and unrestrained woman from another time and space, not the demon princess who carried too much on her shoulders. Shuimo. Shuimo. His body trembled more and more, and his face became paler and paler. Amnesia. He was a coward in the previous life. In order to forget her, in order to not suffer anymore, he made such a frequent amnesia oracle. But he didn't expect that after going around in circles, he would fall in love with her again, and because of this damned amnesia, he would completely lose her now. Ning Shuimo, you are ruthless. Using such a tragic method to choose to let go, using such a tragic method to take revenge on me, Ning Shuimo, how can you be so ruthless? How can you can't. I can't let you go like this. Even if I have to reverse heaven and earth, reverse yin and yang, I want you back. Shuemo, didn't you do everything possible to let me recover my memories? I recovered. You came back, bastard. In the end, you killed her. Shuailan finally came back to his senses. His eyes were completely red. Red light shot out from both of his palms as he recklessly attacked Shinjiuli. Shinjiuli didn't even know how to dodge. He just stood there, and the candlelight around his tall figure seemed to elongate his back. Rongyu Ishinlan was finally angry. He didn't expect that Ning Shuema would end up like this. When Ning Shuema disappeared after being struck by the tribulation lightning, his heart almost sank into hell. He blamed himself and regretted it. Before Shinjiuli left, he asked him to keep an eye on Ning Shuema and not let anything happen to her. However, he thought that she was too stupid to do anything and left her alone in the house. Now that Dizwa had caused such a ruckus, he had to take half of the responsibility. If he had stayed by her side and explained everything to her the moment she woke up, perhaps she wouldn't have forgiven Dizwa temporarily. However, she wouldn't have been in such despair to the point where her hair turned white. She wouldn't have not resisted the tribulation lightning at all and wouldn't have allowed others to block it for her. She was clearly asking for death. She was clearly using her final and tragic method to take revenge on Shinjiuli. Rongyu Ishinlan had been busy helping Shinjiuli break the golden light. When Shinjiuli broke the golden light with his palm, he was almost deafened. He was also busy helping the Sun Moon sect disciples who had vomited blood from the shock to quickly recover. He didn't want more people to die because of the Emperor's loss of self-control. Chapter 1544. When the golden lightning of tribulation came crashing down, he knew that everything was over. Now that he saw Shuailan attack Shinjiuli, he was enraged. He lifted his fan and blocked Shuailan's killing moves. Are you crazy? Shuailan, if it weren't for you coming to the island to cause trouble, she wouldn't have left Carefree Island. If it weren't for you shamelessly sticking by her side, Dizwo wouldn't have had those misunderstandings. Do you still have the face to blame him? Shuailan, you are the bane of their relationship. Shuailan's face paled once more. He staggered back several steps and slumped down his sleeves. Yes, blame me. Mo Wuji suddenly laughed. Blame me. Momo, I've wronged you. With a wild laugh, he flew up and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Rongyue Tianlan didn't think that Mo Wuji would leave so quickly without any hesitation. He finally relaxed. In these troubled times, if this demon were to go crazy here, the consequences would be unimaginable. As he looked up, he saw Shinjiuli's movements. His complexion changed. Shinjiuli stood there, turning a deaf ear to everything around him. His slender jade-like fingers were dripping with blood, but he didn't care. His fingers moved in the air again and again, and a white light burst out from his fingertips. This was the most powerful soul summoning technique. With his own divine power as a guide, even if someone's soul was scattered, he could use this technique to summon back a few wisps. Dizwa, you can't do this. Rongyue Tianlan rushed over, wanting to stop him. But Shinjiuli clearly had an enchantment around him. Rongyue Tianlan was blocked outside, causing him to panic. Not only was using this method to defy the will of the heavens, but it also consumed a great deal of divine power. If something went wrong, Shinjiuli might disappear, not to mention that Shinjiuli had used forbidden techniques and divine power again and again. He was already at the end of his tether. Rongyu Ishinlan even found that there was a white light overflowing from his body. This was a sign of the 5 decays of celestial beings. If this great god was allowed to continue like this, perhaps the only god in the world would no longer exist. However, Rongyue Tian couldn't find any way to stop him. Shinjiuli's movements were very fast. After a while, he slowly stopped and looked at his fingertips. His fingertips were empty. He had already used such a method, but he couldn't even summon a fragment of her soul. He didn't say anything. Instead, he took a light breath and used it again. Rong Yuetian watched helplessly from the periphery as he used it again and again in despair. Shinjiuli seemed to have sunk into madness, or perhaps he had sunk into an abyss of despair. Using such a method to punish himself. The air around him seemed to have sensed his emotions. The originally clear sky was suddenly overcast with dark clouds. Thunder and lightning flashed in the distance one after another. He did not know where the heavy rain had come from. The birds in the sky screamed and soared into the sky. The mountains nearby and the ground beneath his feet were trembling. If God's emotions were too intense, it would affect the climate of the entire continent. It might even cause the sky to fall and the earth to crack. The consequences were unimaginable. If this went on, he would also die. Rongyue Tianlan knew that she should stop him, but she couldn't think of any way to do so. She was so anxious that she walked around in circles. Her hand accidentally touched something in her sleeve. It was hard and slightly warm. There seemed to be an ancient aura circulating on it. When Shinjuli's palm struck the golden light, it had caused the sky to fall and the earth to crack. Chapter 1545. When Shinjuli had struck the golden light with his palm, it had caused the sky to fall and the earth to crack. Coupled with the continuous strikes of the golden lightning, the surrounding large rocks flew up into the sky and fell down one after another. One of the small stones coincidentally fell on Rongyue Tianlan's shoulder, causing a bruise to appear on his shoulder while he was busy. He was about to brush it away when his fingers accidentally touched it. He actually felt a little ancient aura from it. Thus, he casually stuffed the stone into his sleeve and forgot about it in the midst of his busyness. Now that he had accidentally pinched it again, he took it out to take a look. The rock wasn't big. It was about the size of a pebble and was bright red. There were flowing lights changing inside it. He could even feel a little divine power from it. His heart skipped a beat. This rock wasn't an ordinary rock. It seemed to be alive and full of spirituality. It definitely wasn't something that could be produced by the surrounding mountains. What was even more strange was that the aura on it seemed to be similar to Shinjuli's. Rongyu Ishanlin was used to recognizing treasures, but it was his first time seeing such a strange rock. He looked at the red rock and suddenly thought of Ning Shuima's red dress. This small rock seemed to have fallen from the sky after Ning Shuima was struck by lightning and disappeared. Could it be a relic refined by Ning Shuima? No, a relic shouldn't look like that. No matter what, this rock appeared like that. It also seemed to have Ning Shuima's aura. He didn't hesitate and waved the rock in his hand at Shinjuli. Diswa, look at what this is. It has Miss Ning's aura. Shinjuli, who was desperately summoning the spirits, suddenly froze. In the next moment, he had already stretched out his hand to Rongyu Ishanlin. Give it to me. Rongyu Tianlan placed the stone in his palm and quietly approached him. Diswa, take a look. Oh my God, he could finally get close to Diswa. Rongyu Ishanlin clenched her fists in her sleeves. Just as she was about to use her celestial technique to knock out Supreme God who was already at the end of his rope, she suddenly saw his expression as he held the small stone. She was stunned. The hand seal that he had just formed was also silently released. He stared at Shinjuli with his eyes wide open. The ancestor's expression was very strange. It can't be, that stone was really Ning Shuima's. Shinjuli was holding the small stone, and even his fingers were slightly spasming. A child. The moment he sent his godly power into the stone, he sensed a child's aura. To be more precise, it was the aura of the soul of the fetus in Ningxiuma's womb that he could not find in the Heavenly Book Mountain. That soul had left its mother's body for such a long time, but it was actually very complete. Chapter 1546. When she was Shui Emo, she stuck to him every day like a dogskin plaster, as if she wouldn't be able to live without him. But in the end, she still didn't hesitate to take his heart blood and leave, all for the sake of saving that man, the man she had depended on for 300 years. Because of that mistake, he lost a disciple in the immortal world. He lost a wound in his heart that could never be healed. He didn't care that she was a witch from the demon world, but he couldn't ignore the man by her side. She hurt him time and time again for that man, and each time she did it without hesitation. In the end, she even left with that man and disappeared for 10 years. In these 10 years, she had never appeared. Back then, when he placed her in the medicinal cauldron to refine the devil in her body, he had left a part of his soul to protect her soul. Later on, when she was rescued by Shuilan, he had never taken back that small part of his soul. That was why he was able to sense her whereabouts in the Tian-Ci continent. When he wanted to find her, he was able to find her accurately. Even if she went to outer space, as long as she wasn't too far from the Tian-Ci continent, he could sense her. For example, the immortal country. When he came back from the immortal country, he was extremely dispirited and locked himself in a place to cultivate. Probably because his mood was too unstable, during his cultivation, his anger leaked out along with his divine qi. As a result, the entire Tian-Ci continent suffered a disaster. At that time, the Tian-Ci continent would sometimes rain heavily, and sometimes cold winds would blow. Even in the summer, snowflakes would dance. The climate was extremely abnormal. When he found out, countless crops had frozen to death and countless people had starved to death. He knew that he couldn't go on like this, so he left the Tian-Ci continent. Probably because his mood was too unstable, or maybe because he was too unlucky, he was hit by an abnormal ray that suddenly appeared in the sky. This ray didn't take his life, but it caused the wound in his abdomen to explode. In the end, he fainted in the country of Jade Water, which was full of fox immortals. He was saved by the Jade Water Fox clan leader. He was a god and wouldn't get hurt easily. Once he got hurt, it couldn't be cured by normal treatment. In addition, his mood was unstable and he didn't have the desire to heal, so it was even harder to heal. It was the Fox clan leader who sacrificed his own fox pearl to heal his injuries. When the Fox clan leader lost the fox pearl, he lost more than half of his power. When it rained, the Fox clan leader experienced the heavenly tribulation at this time. He couldn't withstand the lightning tribulation and his soul dissipated. Before he died, he entrusted his daughter, Luzine, to Shinjioli and asked him to take care of her on his behalf. When Shinjioli was injured and unconscious, it was Luzine who took care of him. Shinjioli didn't tell her his real name and just casually said that his surname was D. Therefore, this Luzine happily called him Brother D every day. He didn't want to have too much interaction with the Fox clan. Originally, he planned to leave after repaying the debt of gratitude, but he didn't expect to encounter such a situation. From the Fox clan leader, he knew that Luzine was carrying a disease in her womb. If a person with this disease couldn't go through a thunder tribulation before he was 3,000 years old, his body would automatically ignite with the red lotus hellfire, and his soul would disappear from the world. Although Luzine was pretty, her talent wasn't that good. It had been close to 3,000 years, but she had only reached Earth stage level 9. She couldn't advance to Heaven stage, so she couldn't go through a thunder tribulation. Chapter 1547. The Fox clan leader's last request was to ask Shinjioli for help. No matter what, she had to undergo the lightning tribulation when she was 3,000 years old. Shinjioli agreed. Shin Yi's promise was worth 10,000 gold. The spiritual energy in Jishui country wasn't as dense as in Tianxi continent. In order to let Lizine reach heaven rank within 10 years, Shinjiuli brought her back to Tianxi continent. Lizine was a nine-tailed fox, and Shui Mo's original body was also a nine-tailed fox. Although he was injured by Shui Mo, he still had a special feeling of caring for nine-tailed foxes. He placed her in a place with the densest spiritual energy to cultivate and gave her all kinds of elixirs to nourish her. However, Lizine was indeed useless and couldn't be compared to Ningxuemo. In these 10 years, her psychokinesis progressed slowly. She cultivated to the critical point of Earth rank level 9, but she just couldn't pass it. Shinjiuli was too lazy to explain his actions to his disciples. Almost on the day he brought Lizine back, he didn't wait for her to take a breath and threw her to a place with the densest spiritual energy for her to cultivate in seclusion. That place had dense spiritual energy in low risk, so Shinjiuli was very assured and didn't care about her for a year. In the end, after she was released, Lizine's cultivation didn't improve much, but her grievances did. Whenever she saw Shinjiuli, she would cry like raindrops on pear blossoms. She was locked up to the point that she couldn't speak. Shinjiuli rarely felt guilty, so he followed her request and brought her down the mountain to see the world. Lizine took the opportunity to ask for this and that. Shinjiuli didn't lack money the most, so no matter what she wanted, he would satisfy her at any time. Lizine loved to laugh. Her laughter was like a silver bell, which easily influenced others to laugh with her. Shinjiuli stayed with her. Although he didn't have any thoughts, he didn't annoy her and his mood was a little better. In those years, there was no news of Ningxuemo, and he couldn't sense her at all. But after all, she had a part of his soul. He knew that she was still alive, but he didn't know which corner she was living in. He understood that it was time for him to let go. He also had to walk out. Otherwise, the heavenly bestowal continent would suffer another calamity. Therefore, he was also trying his best to adjust his mood so that he could return to his former self. If he wanted to return to the past, he had to return to living alone. Moreover, he was not in the mood to let anyone else stay with him at the heavenly sound peak, not even Lizine. Therefore, other than going to places with dense spiritual energy to cultivate, Lizine had always stayed in the small courtyard that the Sun Moon sect had specially built for her. Every year, Lizine's old illness would act up for 2 days. Shinjiuli had to use his psychokinesis to support her from time to time in these 2 days. For the sake of convenience, he emptied the miscellaneous hall next to the bedroom. When he was treating her old illness, he let her stay there. Once he had overcome his old illness, he immediately asked her to leave. As the final stage approached, Lizine still had no intention of going through the lightning tribulation. Her body was getting weaker by the day, and her old illness was acting up more frequently. In the end, it was almost once a month. Shinjiuli knew that he couldn't delay any longer. Since he had promised the Fox clan leader, he couldn't go back on his words. There were only 2 ways to help Lizine go through the lightning tribulation. The first was for her to rise to heaven ranked level 1. The second was for them to get engaged. To be Shinjiuli's wife, she had to go through the lightning tribulation. The lightning tribulation that the God Empress had to go through was the heaviest. And Shinjiuli didn't even think of marrying the God Empress now. Although he was heartbroken by Ningxuemo, he didn't think of marrying a God Empress to make things worse. But Lizine's lightning tribulation was imperative. Therefore, he had an idea, and that was to get engaged. Chapter 1548. The lightning tribulation that Lizine had to go through during the engagement should be about the same as when she ascended to the heaven stage. The engagement was just a formality. After helping Lizine overcome the lightning tribulation, he could cancel the engagement at any time. Of course, he didn't want Lizine to misunderstand and have any thoughts about him. Therefore, he told Lizine about the pros and cons in advance. He also made it clear that after helping her overcome the lightning tribulation, his promise would be fulfilled. He would send her back to the country of Jade Water and they would have nothing to do with each other in the future. Everything was explained very clearly, and Lizine also agreed very readily, agreeing to it without hesitation. This betrothal was actually a deal to fool the heavens. Shinjioli did things according to his heart and didn't have any taboos. If Ning Xuema was by his side, he naturally wouldn't use the engagement to fool the heavens. However, he had already given up on Ning Xuema and returned to being a bachelor. An engagement ceremony that could be cancelled at any time was nothing to him. He thought that he didn't care about the engagement ceremony, but when the day came, Ning Xuema's figure kept flashing in front of him. His state of mind started to become unstable, and he had the urge to cancel the engagement ceremony. However, the date of the engagement ceremony was already the last day of Lizine's lightning tribulation, so he couldn't cancel it. However, he didn't expect Ning Xuema to suddenly appear at the engagement ceremony. When she asked him if he really wanted to marry Lizine, he couldn't say no in front of everyone. Otherwise, when the engagement ceremony was over, the lightning tribulation wouldn't arrive on time. Moreover, when he saw Ning Xuema, his state of mind was extremely unstable. There was a hint of joy in his anger and sadness in his joy. He thought that she was here for Shuilan again. In the end, Ning Xuema smiled and gave him her blessings. She even danced for him and Lizine. Finally, she smiled and left. From the beginning to the end, he didn't see her sad expression. She was smiling from the beginning to the end. At that moment, his heart, which had finally calmed down, was once again stirred up by her. Looking at her smile, he had the urge to tear her apart. At that moment, he sadly realized that he hadn't forgotten her at all. He simply couldn't let her go. After she left, Lizine wanted to continue the wedding with him. He was frustrated and wanted nothing more than to follow Ning Xuema and drag her back to ask her what she wanted to do and what she was thinking. At that moment, his mind was in turmoil. Lizine reminded him a few times, but he didn't hear anything. It wasn't until the clouds in the sky suddenly rolled and the tribulation clouds appeared that he finally came to his senses. Lizine had actually leveled up at this time. He heaved a sigh of relief. According to their previous agreement, he rose into the sky to block the lightning tribulation for Lizine. Logically speaking, this kind of lightning tribulation didn't mean much to him. However, because Ning Xuema had just come and severed ties with him in such a way, he was often distracted even when he blocked the lightning tribulation for Lizine. Probably only a venerable emperor would dare to be distracted while blocking the lightning tribulation. Of course, his injuries were also more serious than he had expected. After blocking the lightning tribulation, his promise to Lizine would be considered complete. Naturally, there was no need to complete the engagement banquet. Therefore, after he came down, he didn't care about anything at the engagement banquet and went into seclusion to recover. Before he went into seclusion, he also instructed Yelu Jing and to send someone to take care of Lizine. After her injuries were healed, she could be sent back to Jade Water directly. There was no need to repay him. However, he didn't expect that something so irreversible would happen. When he looked back, he was already 100 years old. Everything couldn't go back. Chapter 1549. Xuema, our child is back. When will you come back? I will let you come back. Then come back to my side. Rong Yuetian looked at him with trepidation. Although he didn't know what Diswo was thinking, he knew that the small stone he had picked up had a big effect. Most importantly, Diswa's spirit seemed to have returned a little. Diswa. He called out tentatively. Tianlan, prepare some things for me. Shinjioli said, naming a list of things in one breath. Being able to ask for things was a good thing. At the very least, he wouldn't seek death in the near future. Rong Yuetian agreed without hesitation. Shinjioli held the small stone as if it was the most important treasure in his life. His figure flashed and disappeared. Rong Yuetian also disappeared. The things Dizwo wanted weren't easy to find, so he had to make the best use of his time to get them. Only the disciples of the Sun-Moon sect were left looking at each other in dismay. Their faces were pale, and they didn't know what to do. Everything that had happened just now was like a nightmare to them. Ning Xuema disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. The ancestors seemed to have gone crazy. Almost everyone present could feel the bone-piercing sorrow coming from him. When a god grieves, all living things are hurt. At that time, the emotions coming from the ancestor infected everyone present, making them feel inexplicably flustered, trembling, and wanting to cry. That kind of god's sorrowful aura made it hard for everyone to breathe. Tears streamed down their faces, and they couldn't lift their heads. The 8 great guardians, the 10 great elders, and the 13th senior brother all had deathly expressions. They didn't expect the ancestors' feelings for Ning Xuema to be so deep. They also didn't expect this outcome. Ning Xuema was injured by their hands. They had actually injured the ancestor's most important person. Even if the ancestor didn't punish them, they were already so regretful that they wanted to commit suicide. The 13th senior brother lowered his head and looked at his hands. He had shot out one of the 2 psychokinesis swords that pierced Ning Xuema's heart. His master had treated him with kindness as heavy as a mountain, but he had destroyed the person his master cared about the most. A short sword suddenly condensed in his palm, and he stabbed it towards his own heart. 13th Martial Uncle. One of the protectors reacted quickly and grabbed his hand that was holding the sword. "I've let you down, master." 13th senior brother's face was filled with grief. 13th Martial Uncle, you can't be blamed for this. Ning. Martial Aunt Ning did it on purpose. After all, she killed a disciple of the Sun-Moon sect. You weren't wrong to give such an order. Just as he said this, someone in the crowd suddenly exclaimed, "It's alive." 13th senior brother and the others were startled and immediately looked in that direction. One of the disciples, who had just been placed down and killed by Ning Xuema, suddenly sat up. His face was full of confusion. I'm not dead." 13th senior brother's heart skipped a beat. He flew over and checked Su Kei's body. Then, he lowered his hands and the regret in his heart grew even stronger. That disciple's back had been stabbed by Ning Xuema, and a lot of frightening green blood had flowed out. Moreover, he had died on the spot. That was why people thought that he had been killed by Ning Xuema. However, after careful examination, they found that the wound wasn't deep. The poison wasn't a life-threatening poison, but a poison that could make people appear to be in a state of suspended animation. In other words, Ning Xuema didn't really want to take the lives of these hostages. It was just a means of coercion. Chapter 1550. In other words, Ning Xuema did not really want to take the lives of these hostages. It was just a means of coercion. Everyone immediately checked the injuries on the other 3 hostages. They were exactly the same as the first one. They believed that they would wake up soon. 13th senior brother took a step back and looked at the direction where Ning Xuema had disappeared. He had mixed feelings. He thought that his junior sister had really turned into a demon and could kill without batting an eyelid. He did not expect, it was his fault. It was because he had taken things for granted that he didn't investigate the specific injuries of the murdered disciples that he made such a huge mistake. He suddenly raised his hand and cut off the tendons in his hand. He then raised his head with sweat all over his forehead and coldly instructed the disciples, "Our sect has made a mistake and caused irreparable losses. Now, we are cutting off the tendons in your hands as punishment. When the ancestor returns, we will go to our master and apologize with our lives. Miss Ning is the most important person to the ancestor. Although she is dead, we have to clear her name. No one is allowed to disrespect her. The Sun Moon sect was the #1 sect in the world. When it wanted to clear someone's name, it was naturally very easy. Hence, a few days later, when people mentioned Ning Xuema in the Tianxi continent, no one dared to slander her. The martial arts world was spread about her deeds of saving people. There were even some commoners who started to set up a memorial tablet for Ning Xuema and offer incense. These were all stories for later. After more than 20 years, Marquis Ning's residence still maintained its original look. The current owner of Marquis Ning's residence was Tom. He managed Marquis Ning's residence well. The pavilions and terraces were still the same. The only thing that changed was the people who used to live in Marquis Ning's residence. The servants had basically all changed. Uncle Zhong had also passed away. When Shinjiuli arrived, he did not alarm anyone in the residence. He directly entered the house where Ning Xuemo used to live. It was obvious that Tom was still very loyal to Ning Xuemo. After so many years, there was not a single change in the furniture. Every item was wiped clean. Even the comb and mirror that she used in the past were still there. It was as if she was still living here and had never left. Shinjiuli slowly sat on the gums, his fingers gently stroking the bedding. Although Ning Xuema hadn't lived here for long, this was her first stop in this world. Therefore, if she still had a remnant of her soul, perhaps there would be a trace of it here. Everything was still the same here. Shinjiuli sat there, and it was as if he could see the woman he yearned for day and night was still here. He sat with his eyes lowered, and a familiar pain came from his heart. Xuema, no matter what, I will definitely bring you back. I don't believe that I won't be able to save you even if I use all my strength. He moved his finger and was about to use the soul-searching technique when a voice came from his sleeve. This is the place where my mother lived. I want to see it. The voice was extremely tender and childish, but the words spoken were very adult. Shinjiuli didn't say anything. He took out a small blood-red stone from his sleeve and placed it on the table. The blood-red stone flashed and appeared to be semi-transparent. There was a small fetus swimming happily inside the stone. Shinjiuli studied this stone for a long time, but he still couldn't figure out what it was. However, he could see that the spiritual power of this stone was very strong. Although it looked very small, the space inside was very big. His son's soul could happily roll around and grow in it. Chapter 1551. The space inside the red stone was a real mustard seed space. That day when he found his precious son hiding in here, he had always kept it close to him. When Rongyu Ishinlan gathered all the things needed to revive the children, he took it out and used his divine power to draw its soul out. He didn't expect that the little guy would hug his divine power and play on a swing at first. When it realized that he wanted to take it out, it immediately let go of his divine power and swam into the depths. It was obvious that it didn't want to come out. Normally, little souls would be eager to be reborn. He didn't expect this little guy to be different. Shinjiuli had to coax it and tell it that he wanted to revive it, but the little guy didn't buy it. It just hid there and didn't want to come out. Shinjiuli was impatient and wanted to use force to force it out. He didn't expect that before he could do anything, it would cry like a baby. Its cry was heart-wrenching, and it could even call for its mother. Shinjiuli had never dealt with such a small child in his life. He didn't know if other children were as naughty as this. When it cried for its mother, Shinjiuli's heart softened. He couldn't bear to force it. Although the little guy wasn't immune to his divine power, it seemed to be very wary of him. Ever since it realized that he wanted to get it out of the red stone, it had been avoiding him. Rongyue Tianlan, who was watching from the side, wanted to laugh. She gave an idea to the ancestor. Diswa, children need to be coaxed. If you tell it about your identity, perhaps it will listen to you. After all, it is its biological son. Shinjiuli paused. Then, he told the red stone his identity. I am your father. I won't harm you. I just want to save you. The red stone flickered for a long time. Finally, the little baby's confused voice was heard. Husband. I am a baby boy. Shinjiuli was speechless. Wasn't this child a little too precocious? It was still in its mother's womb. How could it know so much? What he didn't know was that when Ning Xuema was pregnant with it, she chatted with it almost every day. Gradually, it learned a lot. Shinjiuli explained to it, I'm not your husband, I'm your father. He felt that this word was probably too difficult for such a small child to understand, so he changed it to something easier to understand, I'm your father. The red stone paused for a moment and suddenly flicked. The child angrily replied, I'm your father. Pfft. Rong Yuetian, who was beside him, spurted out unkindly. When Shinjiuli glanced at him, he immediately coughed and said, This child is indeed the son of God. He is so precocious. Diswa, take your time to communicate with it. This Xiao Xian will go and prepare other things. Shinjiuli naturally suppressed the urge to smash the stone against the wall. He slowly communicated with it and talked to it. After all, it was the nature of father and son. After some difficult communication, the child finally acknowledged him. Through the conversation with the child, Shinjiuli also knew that there was another universe inside the red stone. It was simply a natural place to nurture a fetus. The child had only stayed here for a few days, but regardless of whether it was wisdom or soul, it had become much stronger. Shinjiuli originally planned to cage the child in his body after he was resurrected and nourish it with his own flesh and blood. Now that the stone had this function, he didn't need to force the child. However, it wasn't appropriate for the child to be in a soul state. Therefore, he took out the small body he had made for the child and let the child's soul enter it by itself. Even if these blankets were from the past, after so many years of drying, how could they possibly retain her scent? Little Shirtu was listless and didn't say anything. Shinjiuli's heart ached unbearably. He paused for a moment, then took out a set of clothes from somewhere and placed it in the crook of his arm. This set of clothes had been worn by Ning Xuema before, and there was a little bit of her aura on it. He had always been reluctant to take it out, for fear that the aura would dissipate every time he took it out. But now, for the sake of the lost child, little Shirtu froze for a moment under the clothes and suddenly jumped up. After that, too many things had happened, so she had probably forgotten about the existence of this small stone. At that time, Nianma was trapped by Lizine. His little body was killed. His soul panicked and ran around. He accidentally bumped into the little Gu Nianma, and the little Gu Nianma immediately wrapped him up. The miscarriage also hurt Nianma's soul. He slept in the little Gu Nianma's stone for a long time. If Shinjiuli did not check on him, he would still be sleeping. After all, he was the son of God. He was naturally sensitive to the power of God. Chapter 1555. After all, it was the Son of God, so it was naturally sensitive to divine power. Therefore, after it stayed by Shinjiuli's side, it recovered faster and faster and became more lively. Now, the child was safe, but the child's mother was nowhere to be found. Shinjiuli sat alone in the quiet night for a long time before he got out of bed. He picked up a pen and paper and started to draw. The person in his memory was very clear. He could draw her appearance even with his eyes closed. As he drew carefully, a woman gradually appeared in his drawing. Her lively eyebrows and slightly curved red lips were all in his memory. He stood in front of the table and drew one picture after another. Each picture was of her in a different form. Some were smiling, some were angry, some were shy, and some were proud. Every picture was of her, and every picture was vivid. It was as if the person in the picture was looking at him. His heart seemed to be hurting more and more. On the contrary, he liked this pain. Only with this pain could he feel that he was still alive. It was as if he was punishing himself. He couldn't draw a picture of sadness. No matter how much he drew, no matter how vivid his drawings were, they were just drawings after all. He couldn't touch her, hear her, or feel her. The paper on the window gradually became clear, and the sky gradually brightened. Another day passed, and another morning came. Another day of hope, and finally despair. He was drawing to the end of another painting when there was suddenly some movement behind him. Paw! Little Shirtu jumped onto the table. It had probably just woken up and was still a little confused. It jumped on the edge of the table and swayed, almost falling down. Shinjuli caught it and put it on the table. Be careful. Little Shirtu swayed again, and the little guy's gaze fell on the painting. Is this mommy? It's so beautiful. Your mommy is the most beautiful. Shinjuli replied. In this world, in his eyes, there was no woman more beautiful than her. The little guy was obviously happy. It jumped on the painting. This is the first time I've seen mommy. It stretched out its little hand and put it on the stone wall, as if it wanted to touch the hand of the person in the painting. This hand had gently touched it through its belly countless times, letting it feel the warmth of being protected. In the past, every time it used its little hands to touch its belly, it would get a response from its mother. It even heard its mother humming a strange song, something about a big-headed son and a small-headed father. Big hands holding small hands and walking to the end of the world. More than once, she had used her hand to touch its little hand across her belly. She had even made a promise, baby, you're going to grow up and be born soon. Then, mommy will be able to hold your hand and walk. Chapter 1556. Nyenma carefully touched his finger and asked, Father, will you leave me in the future? No. Shinjuli made a promise. I will watch you grow up. Nyenma pouted. Mommy said the same thing, but she did not want me anymore. I miss her so much, but she did not come back to see me. Your mommy loves you the most. Don't worry, as long as we work together, she will come back. Well, let's look for her again. It was easy to coax a child. He was finally happy again. He jumped on the table again and looked at the stack of paintings. There are so many mommies. Can I have one to look at? While he was talking, he had already stretched out his little hand and tried to pull a painting across the stone wall. Perhaps he had practiced a new skill in the stone wall, or perhaps he was obsessed with it. The painting flew automatically as if it was pulled by an invisible hand and drilled into the stone wall. When Shinjuli wanted to stop it, only a corner of the painting was left. Little Nyenma cheered from the inside. It really came in. Oh, it melted. The paper was just ordinary paper, and the painting was just an ordinary painting. Naturally, it was not waterproof. However, there was amniotic fluid around little Nyenma. When the painting went in, of course, it became soft and wrinkled. The paint on the painting was also blurred. Wow! Mommy is gone. Little Nyenma cried. Shinjuli was annoyed. He quickly cast a cleaning spell to melt the paint inside so that the liquid inside would not be contaminated and make the little guy sick. After everything was done, he added a small waterproof wizardry barrier on one of the paintings. Then, he used a spell to send the painting in. Finally, the little guy was happy again. Shinjuli suddenly seemed to notice something. He waved his sleeve and put the small stone on the table into his sleeve. There was a sound of footsteps outside the door. The person paused at the door. "Shuemo. Are you back?" The voice was young and magnetic. It was a little retroflex, and the tone was a little strange. Shinjuli was slightly surprised. It was Tom, the chastity-testing beast. He coughed lightly and said coldly, "Come in." Tom was startled. His hearing was amazing, so he still had a deep impression of the ancestor's voice. After being stunned for a moment, he immediately pushed the door open and entered. "Greetings, ancestor." Shinjuli waved his hand and asked him to get up. His fingers moved slightly, and a wisp of aura quietly circled around Tom. Then, he lowered his eyes. Tom didn't have the aura of Ning Shuemo's soul. Tom was still a little uneasy when he saw the number one person on the continent. Ever since he became a human, he had also grown up. However, the speed of his growth was a little slower than that of a normal human. She looked like she was about 16 or 17 years old. Shinjuli didn't usually talk to people casually, but now he talked to Tom for a while. Chapter 1557. Both father and son had left their footprints in every place, and little Nyenma gained a lot of knowledge. Every time they went to a place, his father would go in a hurry and then return slowly. Little Nyenma was still very sensitive. He could clearly feel Shinjuli's emotions, from hope to disappointment and then to despair. Every time they went to a new place, his father's emotions would go through the same cycle, which made little Nyenma feel a sense of unbearable weight. "Father, we will look for mommy slowly. There is no rush. Don't be sad." The little guy was very considerate when necessary. "Okay." Shinjuli only responded with one word. He also felt that his emotions were probably affecting the child too much, so he took a breath and said, "Let's go to the Kirin clan." Little Apple brought Hong Ti to the Sun Moon clan to seek refuge with him. At that time, he had just recovered the memory of Shui Mo and recognized that Little Apple was Long Chuan's relative. Moreover, at that time, he was preparing to expel the devil in Ning Shuemo's body. He did not want Little Apple to disturb him, so he simply sent it back to the Kirin clan. As for Hong Ti, it was a devil phoenix. Although it did not do much evil, there was evil in its body. It could easily strengthen the power of the devil in Ning Shuemo's body if it stayed with her. Therefore, Shinjuli sent the little phoenix to a forbidden place with purifying power to practice. It would take at least 20 years to purify it successfully. The location of the Kirin clan was very secretive. Only a few people in the entire Tianxi continent knew about it. Shinjuli was one of them. One of his apprentices was born here. More than 3,000 years ago, he was injured and woke up here. They had not seen each other for 10 years, and Little Apple had grown a lot. Initially, it was discriminated against in the Kirin clan. When Shinjuli sent it back, it was specially taken care of, so its kind did not discriminate against it. Moreover, Little Apple had learned a lot from Ning Shuemo and Shinjuli over the years. It was no longer an ignorant person. After returning to the Kirin clan, Little Apple also made up its mind that it should practice hard so that it could face its master in the future. Therefore, it had been practicing in isolation for the past 10 years. When it heard the news of the Dizun's arrival, it immediately rushed over. It was already able to transform into a human form. Now, it looked like a 13 or 14-year-old boy. "Dizun, where is my master?" This was the first thing he said when he saw Shinjuli. Back then, it and Ning Shuemo depended on each other for survival. In its heart, Ning Shuemo was no longer just a master with whom it had established a blood contract, but a friend who had gone through life and death together. In these 10 years, it missed her very much. However, it could not enter and leave the Qilin clan as it pleased, so it could only endure it. Chapter 1558. Shinjioli did not say anything, so Kirin continued, Di-Zun, I don't think we should let her stay in one place to practice. She is so outgoing, and it will be very uncomfortable for her to stay in one place all the time. In fact, I am also practicing. Why don't you bring me back? I can practice with her and relieve her boredom. Shinjioli clenched his fists in his sleeves. If only he knew where she was practicing. Since he could not find her here, Shinjioli did not want to waste any more time. He turned and left. Kirin knew that the Di-Zun had always been indifferent and did not like to talk. However, since he came and specifically looked for it, there must be something he wanted to talk to it about. Why did he leave without saying a word after taking a glance at it? Kirin had always been with Ning Xuemo, so it had always been brave. Once it was anxious, it would even dare to talk back to the only god in the world. It had been worried about Ning Xuemo for 10 years. Now that there was finally someone who knew about it, how could it allow him to leave so easily? In a flash, it appeared in front of Shinjioli and said, Di-Zun, please say something. Hey, father, is this mother's guardian beast? Before Shinjioli could say anything, a sharp horn of a red stone emerged from his sleeve. Kirin opened its mouth wide as if it was struck by lightning. Father. Mother. A stone. Its master was married to the great god. She gave birth. And she gave birth to a stone. These 3 nouns were simply 3 thunderbolts, shocking the little Qilin so much so that it couldn't come back to its senses for a while. I want to see it. The red stone jumped out of Shinjioli's sleeve and directly jumped on Kirin's head. Kirin was speechless. It was stunned. Shinjioli still did not say anything. He still spoiled his son very much. Since Nianmo wanted to see the Kirin, he would let him have a good look. Thus, with a wave of his sleeve, Little Apple's body shook, and it immediately returned to its original form, a majestic green Qilin beast. Little Stone bounced and rolled around on its body. Your scales are so slippery. The colors are beautiful too. Di-Zun. It is. It's my master's. The little Qilin stood there stiffly and couldn't speak clearly. Master was clearly a human, so how could he give birth to a stone? Could it be that the ancestor's original body was a stone? It was really possible. The ancestor was so cold and stubborn that he was really like a rock. Kirin's mind was instantly distracted. The little rock was still bouncing around on its body, but it didn't dare to move. It was afraid that the little rock would fall to the ground and cause problems. After little Shirtu had enough of jumping on its body, he flashed again and jumped between its eyes. Kirin hurriedly raised its head and focused its eyes in the middle. It almost became cross-eyed. Darling, slow down a bit. Is your mother really Xuemo? Yes. Chapter 1559. Although Kirin was puzzled, it was still very excited. It raised one of its claws and carefully removed the stone from its face. Let me see you. How did you get into the stone? Where is your mother? Mother has disappeared. My father and I are looking for her, but we can't find her. We can't find her. Shin Nianmo felt wronged. He blinked his eyes and was about to cry. This little guy's every frown and smile was extremely infectious. When it pursed its lips, the little Qilin also felt sour in its heart. At the same time, it also felt that something was wrong. What do you mean by disappeared? She disappeared again. Was she taken away by Shui Lan again? She disappeared for 10 years because of this. After all, Shin Nianmo was still a baby. There were some things that he could not understand. He did not know why his mother disappeared and how she disappeared. Therefore, he only wanted to cry. I don't know. Mommy doesn't want me anymore. She doesn't want my father anymore. We have been looking for her. There was nothing in the world that Shinjuli could not find. After all, she had a child. She loved children so much. How could she leave the child and disappear for no reason? Kirin suddenly raised its head and looked at Shinjuli, who had been standing next to it silently. Great Master, what is going on? My master. Shinjuli was slightly stunned. He had not heard the title to Great Master for a long time. Now, he heard it from Kirin. He felt a stab of pain in his heart, but his tone was calm. Nyenma, come here. Let's go back and look for your mother in other places. Okay. The little stone was about to jump out of Kirin's hand. Kirin quickly held it tightly, mainly because it was afraid that it would fall to the ground. How are you going to find your mother? Father said that we will look for her soul. Once we find her complete soul, she will be able to come back. Shin Nyenma told it what he knew. Kirin's body suddenly shook, and its eyes widened. Her soul is gone. It suddenly raised its head and looked at Shinjuli. Dizun, her soul is gone. Yes. This time, Shinjuli finally replied with a word. Kirin felt as if he had been struck by a thunderbolt. After a long while, he said, why did his soul scatter? Who hurt her? Me. Shinjuli's answer was always so concise and comprehensive. Kirin was instantly enraged. Blood rushed to his head. Why? Did she do anything wrong to you? I'm the one who let her down. Kirin's eyes reddened. She likes you so much. What right do you have to hurt her? In a fit of anger, he slapped out with his claws. A beam of blue light struck Shinjuli's chest. Shinjuli didn't dodge and let the blue light hit him. Kirin's martial arts had already reached a very high level. At the very least, he had reached Earth rank level 7. This time, it furiously struck out with its claws, which contained almost all of its power. Even if it hit a metal plate, it would still be able to create a large hole. However, after it hit the Dizun, his body did not move at all. It was as if he was not the one who was hit. He did not speak anymore. He just raised his sleeve, and the small stone in Kirin's hand automatically flew into his hand. Nyenma, let's go. He turned and left. Kirin was speechless. It angrily turned around 3 times in the same place. No, it wanted to go out. It also wanted to find its master's soul. Of course, it also wanted to know the truth. It was its master's family. It could not let her die without knowing the reason. Chapter 1560. Father, you are bleeding. Little Nyenma jumped in Shinjuli's palm and tried to see him clearly. Shinjuli's lips were indeed bleeding, but he used a cleaning spell to remove the blood. However, his face looked paler. Why did the Kirin hurt you? Little Nyenma was angry. Just now, it wanted to bite the little Qilin in the stone, but before it could do anything, it was brought back by its father. It should have done something. Shinjuli only said 5 words. Kirin was Ning Xuema's family. If her family wanted to beat him, he had no reason to fight back or avoid it. He did not even use his telekinesis to defend himself and took the hit. Although it was painful, what he needed now was a kind of pain. It was as if she would be able to come back after the pain was over. There was a surge of blood in his chest, but he forced himself not to show it on the surface. Little Nyenma tried his best to look at him in the stone. After a while, he suddenly cried, Father, I don't want anything to happen to you. Mommy is gone, and she doesn't want me anymore. Father, you can't lose your soul too. You can't lose me too. I don't want to be an orphan. Mother always said that orphans are very pitiful. He cried so loudly that it almost broke his skin. He was extremely smart. Obviously, he could see that his father was almost hurting himself. He did not seem to want to live anymore. The child's cries were heart-wrenching. If it could come out, it would probably cry by grabbing his collar. Shinjuli was shocked. He was indeed a little desperate now, and he was indeed tired of the world. That person was gone, and half of his life seemed to have been taken away. Every day and every night was a torture. Every moment was a heart-wrenching experience. But now, he still had Nyenma. Nyenma had already lost his mother. He could not lose his father too. Shinjuli raised his hand and patted Little Stone. No matter how upset he was, he did not want to affect the child. He smiled and said, "Don't cry, Nyenma. Father is a god, and his soul will not disappear. Father will not abandon you. He will always be by your side. Nyenma is a man. A man will bleed but not cry. Crying is the behavior of a bear. Stop crying. If you continue crying, you will drown the baby around you." Little Nyenma stopped crying and corrected his mother. Mother said that this is called amniotic fluid, not fetal fluid. Your mother is right. All right, don't cry. He held the stone and shook it gently. The little fellow felt as if it was in a cradle and finally fell asleep. Shinjuli was afraid that he would hurt his vital chi by crying, so he dripped another drop of divine blood into his body. Looking at his face, the little baby's facial features were exquisite. The corners of his lips and nose were a bit like his mother's, and his eyes were like his own. This temper, Shinjuli could not figure out who Nyenma took after. It was definitely not like him. Although he did not remember how he looked like when he was a child, he should have such a cold temper. He was the kind that did not care about anything. Unlike this little guy, who cried and laughed at times. He was also very talkative and lively. His tears and laughter could affect people's moods, making people want to treat him well. In this aspect, he should be like his mother. His mother was probably like this when she was a child. When she laughed, it was as if the sky was clear and the moon was bright. It made people want to hug her. When she cried, it made people feel gloomy, making them want to hug her even more. Chapter 1561. His gaze fell on the sword hanging at his waist. The workmanship was exquisite, and the materials were exquisite. It was not some divine weapon. It was just that the materials were a bit special, and it was quite good for ordinary self-defense. The moonlight sword was a gift from Ning Xuemo. He remembered that when she gave it to him, he proudly hung it on his waist and walked around the Sun-Moon sect, wishing that the entire Sun-Moon sect knew about it. Later on, he lost his memories of Ning Xuemo, and this sword was always left in his storage space, gathering dust. Only when he recovered his memories did he remember this sword, and hang it on his waist again. His fingers caressed the sword inch by inch, as if he could still feel her aura and her temperature. As if he could still see her proud appearance when she gave this sword to him. This was the material she obtained after fighting the Moonlight Winged Dragon for close to a month, and it was her blood, sweat, and tears. The sword was still there, and the person who gave it to him, the familiar pain in his heart came again. He lowered his eyes slightly, standing in place for a while. He had already walked around the heavenly bestowal continent, so he should probably go to the immortal nation to take a look. After all, many things had happened between them there. Perhaps, he could find a part of her soul there. He turned around, and headed towards the immortal nation. The outside world was already turned upside down, but it was as if time had stopped in the immortal nation, and everything was still the same. Shinjioli walked slowly on the streets, and even walked around the shops from time to time. He hid his true appearance, so he was no different from the citizens of the immortal nation, so no one noticed him when he walked around. These were the places he had visited when he was with Ning Xuemo, or when Ning Xuemo had just crossed over. Now that he was revisiting these old places, he felt a sense of loneliness. Things remain the same, but people have changed, and tears flow before speaking. These were the words Ning Xuemo had once recited in front of him when she was still alive. At that time, she was hugging his neck in his embrace, and reciting these words was just a forced expression of worry for the sake of creating new words. Who would have thought that it would become a motto? He strolled around the immortal nation. From time to time, she would buy a few things. These were things that she had bought in the past, and she liked them very much. Now that he had bought it, there was no one else to give it to, so he could only put it in his storage space. He even bought another steamed bun. The steamed bun was like a lantern when held up and like a chrysanthemum flower when put down. Every fold of the steamed bun was filled with an artistic aura. He remembered that when he brought her here for the first time, the first thing she bought was this, and she ate it with great relish. He slowly ate the bun. The steamed buns were actually very delicious, but when he ate them, he felt that his mouth was bitter and his throat was dry. Shen Nianma had also woken up. He peeked out from his father's sleeve and stared at the half-eaten bun in his father's hand. He asked curiously, "Father, is this delicious?" "Nianma wants some too." Shinjioli flicked the stone shell with his finger. "You can't eat it now. You can eat it when you're born and have teeth." Shin Nianma pursed his lips and reached out to touch his head. "Father, when will I be born?" Shinjioli paused for a moment. It's often said that after 10 months of pregnancy, the melon falls when it's ripe. You are 6 months pregnant now, so there should be another 4 months. Shin Nianma turned over and splashed water with his little feet. "So long," Shinjioli stuffed him back into his sleeve. "Grow up well in there. Grow up quickly." Chapter 1562. After Shin Nianma's torment, the pain in Shinjioli's heart seemed to have lessened a little. He had used the soul-searching spell to search every place he passed by, but he still could not find a trace of Ning Xuemo's soul. Therefore, the possibility of her being there was almost zero. It began to rain without them noticing. The wind carried the drizzle with it, and it brought a touch of coolness to the front of their clothes. The people around them held up their umbrellas, and the streets were full of colorful umbrella flowers. It was very beautiful. A couple who were holding hands ran past Shinjioli. They shared the same umbrella and laughed as they ran past Shinjioli. When they passed by Shinjioli, the woman could not help but look at him. The couple's conversation could be heard in the wind. "Hey, why is that person not holding an umbrella? His hair is wet. Baby, you should be concerned about your husband. My hair is a little wet too. You can have the umbrella." "No way. I will be sad if you get wet. Let it rain on me." "Will the lock we just fastened be damaged by the rain?" "Don't worry, it won't. The bronze lock is not afraid of the rain. We want to be together for a long time, so the lock will naturally stay together for a long time." The two of them ran away as they spoke. Shinjioli's heart ached. He strolled and walked towards the Lover's Bridge. The Lover's Bridge was full of dense locks. Each lock was a hope, a hope. Shinjioli's fingers gently stroked the locks, and his eyes were in a trance. He seemed to see the girl in red coming with a sky-blue umbrella. "Great God, should we also put a lock here? This is very interesting. A lock can lock a relationship? What a joke. Just tie it, just tie it. It is just a good luck. Do you not want to be with me for a long time? All right, as you wish. Then what lock should we tie? Bronze lock. Iron lock. Hey, where did you find a jade lock? Iron and copper can produce embroidery, but this item will not produce embroidery. Although the jade lock looks good and won't rust, it's afraid of falling. If it bumps and bumps, it might break. Don't be afraid. With the support of telekinesis, I'm not afraid of falling. And you're so thoughtful. Then we'll tie it up and wait for me to carve some words. Some distant memories, the longer they were, the clearer they became. The clearer they were, the more heart-wrenching they were. The things that were once careless were now indescribably blissful. Only when they truly lost it did they realize that it was a wound that could never be healed. Just thinking about it was painful to the bone marrow. There was an umbrella in his hand, and it was exactly the same as the one she had used back then. Standing on this bridge again, she felt as if a lifetime had passed. Shinjioli didn't know how long he had been standing on the bridge. It was so long that his sleeves were wet and his cheeks were cold. He remembered the fate of the jade lock. She had taken it off and destroyed it before throwing it into the water. He opened his palm and the broken jade lock lay there quietly. There was a deep line between the names Shinjioli and Ningxiuema engraved on it. It was as if there was an insurmountable gap between the two names. It was just like the distance between him and her. He looked at it for a moment and kept the jade lock away. Then, he condensed a bronze lock and used a carving knife to carve a few words on it. Shinjioli, Ningxiuema, Shinyanma. The three names were connected by a heart shape, as if they were a family. He solemnly tied the bronze lock to the bridge and cast a few spells on it. This way, no one would be able to destroy it if it was tied here. This lock would be locked until the end of time. Chapter 1563. Shuema, Nyenma and I have been waiting for you to come back. Where are you? He held the railing of the bridge and fell into deep thought. These days, he had been to all the places that he could. He even went to places that were impossible. He could not find any trace of her soul. This situation was very unusual. Even if she was disheartened before her death, her soul should still be there after being struck by the thunder. With his method of searching, it was impossible that he could not find any trace of her soul. Moreover, she was struck on Mount Buddha Lotus of the Sun Moon clan. That place originally had the effect of gathering souls. If an ordinary disciple was struck and had their soul scattered, those scattered souls wouldn't even be able to escape Buddha Lotus Mountain. They would be scattered all over Buddha Lotus Mountain like gossamers, but they wouldn't know about it. If he wanted to collect them, he could at least collect 2 souls and 3 spirits. Ningxiuema was a level 9 earth rank before she died. She had not yet become a celestial being. Even if her soul was strong, it was impossible for all the scattered souls to escape without leaving a trace. This was not very reasonable. Even if she was the soul of a 9-tailed fox in her previous life, it was impossible for her to reach this level. He had already done a spell on Mount Buddha Lotus. Indeed, there was not a trace of her. Even her aura had disappeared. It was as if this person had never appeared in this world. It was as if there was a hand in the dark that erased all traces of her life in this world. He recalled the golden purple lightning during her tribulation. If it was an ordinary person ascending from Earth rank 9 to Heaven rank 1st rank, the tribulation lightning would be silver lightning. If they were originally from the celestial race or the ordinary devil race, the thunder would be purple. For example, Lizine was from the celestial fox race, so the thunder would be purple. When a high-level celestial or devil was to ascend, the thunder would be golden. However, when Ningxiuema was going through the thunder, it was purple. Even if she were to ascend to level 1, it should not be this color. What was going on at that time? Could it be that she actually had another identity? Did she successfully ascend to her original state? But whether it was the immortals or devils in this world, he knew most of them. If there was an extremely high-level immortal or devil that succeeded in transcending the tribulation, the entire continent would be shrouded in auspicious clouds or devil clouds. It would be impossible for there to be no movement at all like now. He recalled her earliest origins. She seemed to have come from the other side of the black hole. Could it be that she had returned to her original world after the tribulation? With this in mind, Shinjuli gripped the railing of the bridge tightly. Had he already gone to another world? Shuama, since you could travel to this spacetime, then I can also travel to your spacetime. Since you refuse to come back, then it's my turn to look for you. Lord Father, where are we going to look? Little Shirtu poked his head out. Nyenma, do you miss your mother? Yes. Shin Nyenma answered loudly without hesitation. Good. Then just call out to her in your heart from time to time and tell her that we're going to look for her. Nyenma is calling her. Will she hear him? Yes. Mommy, I miss you so much. Mommy, I miss you so much. Shin Nyenma immediately cried loudly. His voice was so loud that Shinjuli's eardrums were buzzing. Shinjuli was speechless. He patted little Shirtu and said, "You don't have to cry out. Just think about it in your heart. If Ning Shuama had returned to her original state, then she must be a high-level celestial or devil. She and Shin Nyenma were connected. If Shin Nyenma always thought about her in his heart, it would create a magnetic field effect." Chapter 1564. As long as she was still alive, she should be able to receive it. It would form a reflection in her heart and be connected to Shin Nyenma's magnetic field. As long as he could find a common magnetic field, he could follow that magnetic field to find her. In fact, he was taking advantage of his son, but he really could not care less. In the vast planet and the vast starry sky, there were countless space portals. Shinjuli shuttled through various space portals, looking for the black hole that would only appear once in a few thousand years. However, his luck was obviously not good. He had been shuttling through these spaces for 2 months, but he still could not find it. Shin Nyenma did not know how many times he had called for his mother in his heart, but he did not receive any response. This was also a big blow to him. Every day, he was listless in the small stone and could not lift his spirits. "Father, does Mommy really not want Nyenma anymore? Father, is Nyenma not obedient? Why doesn't Mommy want me anymore? Father," Shin Nyenma would always ask the same question a few times every day. Shinjuli finally felt that it was not a way to go on like this. He could not leave a shadow on his child. Perhaps the way he found was wrong. "Nyenma, your mommy loves you the most. She will not abandon you. She is just too far away from us now, so she can't hear you. Let's look for her again. As long as we are close to her, she will be able to hear you and respond to you. Even if she doesn't want your father, she will not abandon you." After hearing this, Shin Nyenma finally perked up and nodded heavily. "Well, Mommy will definitely want me. Perhaps my ability is not good enough. When my ability is better, I will be able to sense Mommy." As he spoke, he pulled out a book from nowhere and began to read. The book was written by Shinjuli himself. Of course, the book was also waterproof, so Shin Nyenma could practice in it without any delay. It was strange that he was now 8 months old, but his body size was not much bigger than before. However, he was getting smarter and could often draw inferences from one case. In the process of looking for his wife, Shinjuli did not neglect his son's education. He was originally an expert in teaching apprentices. Now, he was even more dedicated to teaching his son. He even specially designed a set of cultivation methods for his son. Of course, Because he didn't have any experience in taking care of children, he had even bought books on how to educate children. Therefore, although little Nyema followed Shinjioli everywhere, he did not delay much. He was not even out of his mother's womb yet, but he had already learned a lot of martial arts. Father, what do the 3 flowers of crowning mean? What this means is... Shinjioli was explaining to him when suddenly, the ground beneath his feet sank, and a strong force pulled him down. He staggered and almost fell. He quickly steadied himself in the air. At this moment, he was still in the starry sky. After passing through so many spatial doors, this was the first time he had encountered a situation where he was being sucked in. He looked down and saw a milky white vortex spinning below him. His heart suddenly jolted. Perhaps there was some mystery behind this. Almost without hesitation, he stuffed Shin Nyinma into his sleeve and jumped into the white whirlpool. Poof! He popped his head out from the bottom of the sea. When he got ashore, he found that it was a dead end. The whistling cold wind was bone-chilling, and the big stones on the ground were rolling. In this place, apart from the deep blue sea, there were rocks everywhere. There was no trace of green or human life. She used the fate of being an eternal cursed star in exchange for your rebirth. Shuailan looked like he was crying and laughing at the same time. Shinjioli's face was pale. His eyes scanned the coffin again and again, as if he was looking for something. After a while, he asked, "Her corpse?" It was burned. At that time, Momo and I accidentally broke into this place and saw this coffin. Only after the original owner read the memories of her previous life and burned the corpse and the coffin could her fate as a heavenly calamity star be unraveled. Therefore, Momo burned the corpse and the coffin. However, I don't know why this coffin reappeared. Shuailan pressed his palm on the coffin. When he raised his hand again, there was blood on his palm. Chapter 1566. Shuailan pressed his palm on the coffin. When he lifted his hand, there was blood on his palm. This coffin is actually bleeding, it's bleeding. Is this Momo's blood? Could it be? Shinjioli's fingers were cold. 5 words suddenly appeared in his mind: blood curse soul return technique. This was very similar to the legendary Demon Realm secret technique, blood curse soul return technique. Although Shinjioli had recovered his memories, he had only recovered the memories of 2 lives. One was Shui Mo's, and the other was Ning Shuamo's. Before he met Shui Mo and before he met Ning Shuamo, his memories of 3 lives were still blank. Although he didn't remember things from a long time ago, he faintly felt that he had lived for at least 10,000 years. But when he met Shui Mo, it was only 3,000 years ago. There were at least 7,000 years before that. In his memories of these 2 lives, there was no concept of a blood curse soul return technique. But now, this term had suddenly appeared. Even he himself didn't know where this concept came from, as if it came from a distant memory. As far as he knew, this blood curse soul return technique was the highest and most tragic technique in the demon realm. The caster had to use all the blood in his body as a catalyst to condense a blood coffin. Then, at the cost of his soul being reincarnated as a heavenly calamity star in exchange for another person's rebirth. This was originally a method used by the higher-ups of the demon realm to trick the lower-ups into working for them. For example, if the higher-ups died for some reason, they could trick their loyal subordinates into using this technique. At the cost of their own life, the higher-ups would be reborn. This technique also had a legendary characteristic. In order to remove this technique, the reincarnated person had to return to this place and burn the blood coffin and the corpse. Only then could they break the fate of being a heavenly calamity star, achieve perfection, and obtain the greatest happiness. Because of this legendary characteristic, the subordinates of the demon realm once used this curse technique as a means to show their loyalty to their superiors. Some low-level demons use this curse technique without hesitation for the sake of the illusory great perfection in the future, just for the sake of their final happiness. Later on, some demons probably noticed the loophole of this technique. It didn't seem to be as godly as the legend said, and gradually stopped being fooled. As a result, this spell was lost in the later period. When Shinjioli had Shui Mo's memories, even Shinjioli didn't know that there was such a curse technique in this world. Naturally, he didn't think that Shui Mo had paid such a huge price for his resurrection. When he woke up, it was already 10 years later. Long Chuan used his own soul and body as a guide to repair his heart, allowing him to revive. Chapter 1567. It was not until he recovered all the information about Shui Yimo in this life and heard some of Ning Xuema's narration of her past life that he finally knew that Shui Yimo had done so much for him in that life. Now that he saw the blood coffin and saw the runes on it, the specific characteristics of this spell emerged in his mind. There was another characteristic of the spell that even the caster did not know about. In order to completely remove the spell, not only did the reincarnated person need to burn the corpse, but the person who was saved also needed to burn the blood coffin. Otherwise, the blood coffin would appear again and again, and the fate of being a loner would not change. He closed his eyes slightly and rubbed his fingers on the blood coffin for a moment. There was a fire on his fingertips, and the blood coffin was instantly set ablaze. The fire soared into the sky, and the air was filled with a faint smell of blood. Mother! Shin Yinma jumped out from Shinjuli's sleeve and was about to jump into the coffin. He could not bear to let go of his mother's smell. Shinjuli held it tightly. Nyenma, your mother is not here. All that was left behind was her resentment and the power of the curse. But there is mother's smell here. Shin Yinma looked at the coffin eagerly, as if he wanted the coffin to hug him. Shuilan looked at the jumping red stone with his eyes wide open. His eyesight was very good, so he naturally saw the little guy in the red stone. He looked as if he was struck by lightning. It is Momo's child. Shinjioli did not answer him. He only put Shin Yinma back into his sleeve. The resentment of the spell was too strong, and Shin Yinma was, after all, a little baby. He was afraid that it would offend him. The coffin was burning there, and there seemed to be endless bitterness and resentment coming from the coffin. It made people have the urge to cry. Shinjioli's spiritual power was strong, so he could certainly endure it. However, Shin Yinma cried in his sleeve. Mommy, Mommy! Shinjioli cast a spell on the sleeve, completely isolating the sleeve from the outside world so that the aura would not affect the child. Shuilan stood there and felt his eyes sting. He looked coldly at the burning coffin and laughed coldly. This coffin can't be burned. I've already burned it 8 times, and every time I'm done, it would reappear at the same spot the next day. Shinjioli remained silent. He stood in place and watched the coffin burn to ashes. He exhaled softly. Shuima, no matter which world you are in now, the fate of being a jinx will no longer follow you. He closed his eyes and sensed the aura in the wind. A moment later, he was disappointed. He had thought that this aura, which contained Shui Yimo's resentment, would automatically search for the original owner. Unexpectedly, this aura only dissipated on the spot, and had no intention of tracking down the original owner. Chapter 1568. Just as he flew into the air, he suddenly sensed something. He turned around abruptly, and his heart sank. In the sky above the coffin, clouds were rapidly gathering. The clouds were white at first, but gradually, they turned into a light red color, tribulation. At this time, there was no second person who was going through tribulation here. Shinjioli turned around and flew down. He saw Shui Lan standing on the small platform, looking up at the clouds in the sky with his arms wide open. His eyes were filled with fanaticism. "Momo, are you here to pick me up?" "Shui Lan, get out of the way." Shinjiuli flew down. This was a tribulation lightning. With Shui Lan's current strength, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to deal with it. Although Shinjiuli didn't like this guy, he didn't want anything to happen to him because he used to be someone that Ning Shuama cared about. He waved his sleeves, and a gust of wind flew out. He wanted to slap Shui Lan away first. Unexpectedly, just as the gust of wind flew out, a faint red light enveloped Shui Lan. Shinjiuli's gust of wind hit the red light, causing it to sway. "Ha ha ha, it must be Momo who can't bear to see me in pain and came to pick me up." Shui Lan laughed loudly in the red light. He opened his arms and faced the rolling red clouds. "Come on." This time, the lightning came quickly and fiercely. Before Shinjiuli could react, the red lightning had already flown down like fire snakes and hit Shui Lan's body. Shui Lan didn't have any intention of resisting. The red light became brighter and brighter, illuminating the ground as if it was a sunset. In the red light, his clothes were already burning. It was as if he was bathing in the red lotus karmic fire. He didn't move at all, and only his two arms desperately tried to resist the red light. "Momo, Momo." His voice was pained and slightly trembling. He didn't allow others to block the lightning for him. Shinjiuli had no choice but to watch him stand there and be struck by the red lightning again and again. His whole body was like a burning fireball. In the firelight, Shui Lan finally looked at Shinjiuli. There was a smug look on his face as he said, "Ha ha ha, Momo has finally come to pick me up." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly exploded like a firework, the red clouds dispersed, and the earth returned to normal. It was as if nothing had happened. Shinjiuli's body swayed in the air. Even Shui Lan had disappeared. He thought for a moment, and his heart stirred. He immediately cast a spell to collect the soul. Shui Lan had just been struck and scattered. Even if his soul had been scattered, there must be some scattered souls left at the place where he had been. Even though he didn't like Shui Lan, he was still someone who had a lot to do with Ning Shuama in this world. If he was still alive in this world, Shinjiuli would still feel that there was someone who missed that person as much as he did. At least he wouldn't feel so lonely. After a while, he looked down at his empty fingertips and then at the place where the red clouds had appeared. His fingers clenched again. Nothing. Shui Lan had also disappeared completely. Not even a trace of his soul was left behind. Could it be that he had really been taken away by Ning Shuama? Did they go to the same place? He flew up and circled the place where the red clouds had appeared. He couldn't find any trace of Ning Shuama's aura. He descended in a daze and landed on the stone platform where Shui Lan had been standing. Just now, when the red lightning enveloped Shui Lan along with the stone platform, it only struck him, leaving nothing behind. The stone platform, on the other hand, was safe and sound. Not even a trace of being struck by lightning was left behind. Chapter 1569. Shinjiuli stood on the stone platform for a moment. After the lightning struck, the air here seemed to have been purified. The aura of Shui Lan and the resentment of Shui Emo had disappeared without a trace. He could no longer sense them. They were also struck by lightning and disappeared without a trace. There was not even a trace of their souls left behind. Shinjiuli sat on the platform with his eyes closed. No one knew what he was thinking. His robes flapped in the wind, and his figure was reflected on the mountain wall. He looked more lonely and desolate than he had ever been before. Although he did not react, the baby in his sleeve clearly sensed his mountain-like emotions. He poked his head out of his sleeve and shivered when he sensed his father's cold and despairing emotions. He called out timidly, Father. Did mother really take away that uncle from just now? Why didn't she take Nyenma away? Does she not want us anymore? His voice was soft and timid. There was a hint of disappointment and confusion. Doesn't mother love Nyenma the most? Why didn't she take Nyenma away? Nyenma has been so obedient. Towards the end, he was already on the verge of tears. Shinjioli heaved a sigh of relief. He held the stone in his hand and looked at it. Nyenma, it's not that your mother doesn't want you, but she doesn't know who you are. Don't worry. Nyenma, the road ahead is probably going to be more difficult. You have to learn to be strong. Shin Nyenma looked at him with his eyes wide open. Father. Shinjioli rubbed the stone with his finger and let it sway. Nyenma, no matter what, you have to remember that you are a man. When a man encounters a problem, crying will not solve it. You have to learn to face it. Shinjioli took the opportunity to educate him. This child seemed to be a little too fond of crying. Was it because he was too young? Or was it because of his character? Or was it because he spoiled him too much? He began to think. This child was the only connection between him and her. Now, it was also his support. Naturally, he hoped that this child would be able to support the world in the future. After all, he had never taken care of a child before, and it was his first time taking care of such a small child. Naturally, she did not know that Shin Nyenma was much stronger than his peers. After all, he was still too young. Crying was a child's nature. It had nothing to do with gender. Shin Nyenma did not fully understand what Gu Shijiu was trying to say, but he did understand half of it. His father did not like to see him cry. Therefore, he nodded seriously in the stone. Nyenma, try not to cry in the future. Nyenma, you have to be a man in the future. Shinjioli heaved a sigh of relief and patted the stone. That's a good boy. But, Mommy used to say that only men who are married can be called men. Those who are not married are called boys. When they are young, they are called boys. Chapter 1570. Those ancient memories were not related to anything. The main thing was the skills that he used to have. He had forgotten them because of the repeated hibernation, but now there were signs of them gradually recovering. For example, he could now make some deductions based on these unpredictable space doors. He did not know how long he had been calculating in front of these space doors. Suddenly, he turned around and rushed down directly into the turbulent sea on the desolate planet. He calculated the direction very accurately. After rushing down, he found a whirlpool a few hundred meters deep. The whirlpool was huge and very deep. It was like a big black hole that was swallowing the surrounding seawater. Shinjioli made up his mind and rushed directly into the whirlpool. He was drawn into the depths of the sea by the whirlpool. Strangely, the whirlpool appeared for more than a minute and then disappeared automatically. The sea returned to its calm state. There was a sea in heaven and earth called the ultimate ruin. The water of the ultimate ruin nourished everything in the world. After a big circle of swaying and rolling, Shin Nyenma finally poked his head out of his father's sleeve. After looking around, his eyes widened. The blue water was the sky, and the coral was the ground. The crystal blue water swayed around him. From time to time, there were groups of different kinds of fish that he had never seen before swimming past him. The scenery was unprecedentedly beautiful. He even saw two mermaids swimming over from afar. Di Zun. The two mermaids finally swam in front of the father and son. One of the mermaids called out his father's honorific. Shinjioli's eyes fell on the two mermaids. One was a man and the other was a woman. The man was very handsome, and the woman was as charming as a flower. Yi Feng, you are really here. The man and the woman were Yifeng and Yan Ziyuan, who had died for love. Just as Shinjuli speculated, they were reborn as mermaids and were really together. This was another world. Here, one could not feel the storm outside. In the depths of the sea, it was always calm and beautiful. In the depths of the sea water automatically retreated to the sides and became the background. In the snow-white sea sand, there was a huge house made of shells. Yifeng and Yan Ziyuan were already married, and this shell house was their love nest. When old friends met, it was natural for them to exchange greetings. After Yifeng pulled Yan Ziyuan to kowtow to the ancestor, he invited him to his shell house. Although the shell house couldn't be said to be magnificent, it had an elegant and warm style, making people feel warm as soon as they entered. After Yifeng and Yan Ziyuan were reborn in the sinkhole, they were delighted that neither of them had lost their memories. The moment they woke up, they began searching for each other in the sinkhole. Finally, they found each other and naturally joined together. The resources here were plentiful, and they didn't have to worry about food and drink. The two of them lived a very comfortable life here. The only drawback was that they couldn't leave and couldn't see their own kind. This place was a world of its own. Although the sea had seawater rushing out of the ruins of End through a special channel, the two of them were unable to do so. Fortunately, the two of them were not particularly attached to the outside world. As long as they stayed by each other's side, even hell could become heaven. Moreover, the living environment here was much better than hell, so the two of them were very satisfied. Yan Ziyuan was already pregnant, and her slightly protruding belly could be seen in her clothes. Yifeng understood that the ancestor must have secretly done something for them to be reborn, so he was naturally very grateful to him and Ning Xuemo. Chapter 1571. Just as he was regretting that the news of their rebirth could not be spread to the outside world and not let Ning Xuemo know, Dizun coincidentally arrived. Dizun, I wonder if Miss Ning has been well. Yan Ziyuan was concerned about her good friend and was the first to ask. Shinjiuli lowered his eyes slightly and did not answer her question. He had not come here to reminisce with old friends, nor to talk about his entanglements with Ning Xuemo. He only had one purpose for coming here. Yifeng, there is a passage in the ruins of En that leads to another world. Do you know where it is? Yifeng pondered for a moment. I have been to every corner of the ruins of En for the past few years. There is indeed a cloud gate in the southeast direction. I don't know what is behind the cloud gate, but the noise is terrifying. I have tried to open the gate, but there should be an ancient enchantment on the gate. I can't open it no matter what. I don't know if the gate leads to another world. Shinjiuli stood up. Bring me there to take a look. It was a jade gate that seemed to support the heavens. The jade was covered in moss after being soaked in seawater. Under the cover of the moss, one could faintly see the complicated decorative patterns on the gate. There were two simple seal characters on the gate, Cloud Gate. The seawater in this place was exceptionally cold. Furthermore, there seemed to be a repulsive force on the Cloud Gate. This repulsive force pushed away anything that approached the Cloud Gate. Yifeng used a special finger technique to throw a stone at the gate. Before the stone touched the gate, it was reflected back at a speed even faster than Yifeng's throw. If Yifeng had not been prepared and pulled Yan Ziyuan away in advance, the stone would have hit him instead. The stone shattered into pieces in the process of being reflected. It was obvious that this gate did not allow any species to approach it. Yifeng told Shinjiuli about the methods he had used to get close to the gate but had failed. Shinjiuli listened without saying a word. He looked at the Cloud Gate. This Cloud Gate was very familiar to him. Some memories seemed to surge in his mind. These memories were fragmented and could not be connected at once. However, He clearly captured the scene of himself walking out from behind this gate many years ago. Although he had lived in this world for many years, he could not remember his origins. Every time he tried, it was a blur. Later, he set up the oracle that he would sleep once every 900 years and forget everything when he woke up. He did not remember anything about his past. Only after coming to this land of death did his memories seem to slowly recover. From time to time, inexplicable scenes would appear in his mind. For example, this gate. Now, he finally saw the door. It was the same as the one in his memory. However, the door in his memory was brand new. It didn't have the green moss that had grown over tens of thousands of years. With a wave of his sleeve, a hurricane flew toward the door. The seawater rolled back in an instant. The green moss on the gate was wiped away by an invisible hand, revealing the simple and complicated patterns on it. When the surrounding seawater finally calmed down, he could hear a faint whistling sound behind the cloud gate. It was as if there was another world on the other side. Yifeng's gaze fell on Shinjuli. He could not help but admire him. He had tried all kinds of methods to remove the green moss on the cloud gate, but it was all in vain. But the ancestor had waved his sleeve and removed the green moss on the gate, making it look as clean as if it had taken a bath. Chapter 1572. Yifeng, do you guys want to leave this place? Shinjuli suddenly turned around and asked Yifeng. Yifeng immediately looked at his wife beside him. Yan Ziyuan and he looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with clear longing. No matter how good a place was, if there were no other people of the same kind, one would be tired after a long period of time. If they could leave this place and return to the Sharkmen clan, it would also be a good idea. Perhaps they would encounter some storms after leaving this place, but who would be willing to spend their entire life in a place like stagnant water? Yifeng nodded solemnly, of course. Does Dizun have a way? Shinjuli said indifferently, I can send you guys out of this place, but the price is 10 shark pearls. Yifeng was stunned. Shark pearls were actually formed by Sharkman's tears. Ever since he reunited with Yan Ziyuan, he felt like he was soaking in a honey pot every day. When had he ever cried? Sharkman's tear glands were not developed since birth, so he rarely cried. Then should he cry now? But how could he cry in this kind of mood? Yan Ziyuan, who was beside him, was stunned. She looked at her husband and coughed lightly, I have shark pearls. She took out a pouch from her body and poured out a few glowing pearls from the pouch. Every pearl was sparkling and translucent, in the shape of a teardrop. They spun around in her palm. They were the shark pearls, and there were a total of 14 to 15 of them. Yifeng looked at the shark pearls and then looked at her. He was a little nervous. Ziyuan, have you cried before? Was there something that he did not do well enough? He made her cry. Yan Ziyuan sighed softly, I cried a few times in my dreams. Back then, when Yifeng died in her arms, it left a deep impact on her. Although she was reborn as a mermaid, she would still occasionally dream of the scene at night. It made her feel the heartache back then in her dreams, and she would cry. Yifeng should have also thought of this. He couldn't help but hug his wife tightly. Ziyuan, you are pregnant now. Don't think about the past. Yan Ziyuan smiled sweetly and leaned into her husband's arms. Her face was red. I understand. I have already tried my best not to think about it. The two of them had been loving each other for the past few years. They were already used to it. Yifeng hugged his wife and comforted her. He only let her go when he saw that she was truly happy. At this time, Yifeng remembered that the ancestor was still standing beside them. His handsome face was slightly red. He coughed and handed the shark pearls over. Ancestor, these shark pearls should be enough, right? Shinjioli looked at the shark pearls and didn't take them. The shark pearls that I want must be 5 yang pearls and 5 yin pearls. The yang pearls were the tears of the male shark men. Therefore, Yi Feng had to cry for them too. Yi Feng rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. He didn't like to cry. Now that he was asked to cry, he really couldn't cry. He was wondering whether he should cut himself twice. The pain might make him cry, but the ancestor spoke again. No matter what kind of shark pearls it is, they must be fresh sharkman's tears of love. Yi Feng and Yan Ziyuan looked at each other. It was difficult to make them cry for love. Shinjioli looked at them and slowly said, I have a way to make both of you cry. As soon as he said this, the two of them were shocked. Yi Feng subconsciously pulled Yan Ziyuan behind him and looked at the ancestor cautiously. Ancestor, I don't want Ziyuan to suffer any harm. She is pregnant now. She needs to be happy and can't stand any stimulation. Shinjioli looked at the way he protected his wife. His eyes slightly darkened and a trace of sadness flashed through them. Chapter 1573. The woman he loved was also pregnant, but he did not stay by her side from the beginning to the end. He even gave her such a big shock. Compared to Yi Feng, he was not a qualified husband. Shuima, I hope you will give me the chance to make it up to you. He looked at the two people who were on guard and slightly lowered his eyes. He did not want to upset the two people who loved each other so much. However, in order to see Ning Shuima again and to find Nianma's mother, he had to sacrifice them a little. He did not say much. He just spread his sleeves in the sea, and the sparkling waves suddenly turned into a huge mirror. The clouds in the mirror gradually dispersed, and a figure appeared on it. Yi Feng was shocked. He held Yan Ziyuan's hand and subconsciously wanted to take 2 steps back. However, his feet seemed to be fixed by an invisible force, and he could no longer move. Yan Ziyuan, who was beside him, was obviously in the same situation. Both of them could not help but look at the mirror. The mirror showed the ice field and the ice cave. The more Yi Feng looked at it, the paler his face became. The images that flashed in the mirror were all the adventures that he and Yan Ziyuan had in the ice field. The images started from when Yan Ziyuan fell into the ice cave, and he sacrificed himself to save her. That year, after Yi Feng used the weapon dismemberment technique to kill the monster in the cave, he was also like a lamp that had run out of oil. When he was buried underground with Yan Ziyuan, he was actually already dead. However, he was afraid that Yan Ziyuan would be scared, so he forced himself to control one of his hands to comfort her. When he heard about the arrival of Di Zun and the others, he couldn't hold on any longer and his soul scattered. Therefore, he didn't know what happened afterwards. Now, he finally saw it. He saw Yan Ziyuan holding him and walking like a crazy person. He saw her eating the fish that he roasted on the edge of the cliff and singing to him in a low voice. The scenes were almost heartbreaking. Yi Feng saw it with his own eyes. His heart was in pain, and his eyes could not help but feel sour. It turned out that Ziyuan had done so much for him back then. It turned out that this was how she died. After he was revived in the ruins of End, it was Yan Ziyuan who found him first. After the two of them met again, Yan Ziyuan threw herself into his arms and hugged his waist tightly. No matter what, she refused to let go and cried her eyes out. She did not mention anything about that past, so this was the first time Yi Feng knew about it. Even if he was a man of iron and blood, he couldn't help but be heartbroken when he saw that scene, and tears flowed out drop by drop, turning into mermaid pearls. Yan Ziyuan was a sensitive person. Not long after she started watching, she started to cry. Fortunately, Shinjioli was more humane. After she poured out the 5 mermaid pearls, he immediately covered her eyes with his sleeve, preventing her from seeing the images on the mirror for the time being. It was not known when the water mirror had disappeared. Yi Feng was still immersed in the past and could not come out. It was not until Yan Ziyuan pulled on his sleeve that he came back to his senses. He subconsciously hugged his wife's waist and said, "Ziyuan." Before he could finish his sentence, a wave of water suddenly rolled toward them, enveloping them and rushing them in a certain direction. Amidst the roaring sound of the water, they could faintly hear the ancestor's voice, "Don't struggle, I'll send you out." Yi Feng was stunned, and his heart was filled with joy. He subconsciously hugged his wife gently and protected her in his arms, saying, "Ziyuan, don't be afraid, we're going out now." Yan Ziyuan was also happy and surprised. She was also a little upset, saying, If I knew that we could go out now, I would have brought along the clothes that I made for the child." Following the disappearance of the jade door, a massive golden wave surged out from the other side of the door and crashed down on Shinjiuli. Shinjiuli did not dodge, instead, he rushed toward the golden wave. His figure was like a lightning bolt, like a bolt of lightning, like a bolt of the door, sliding into the door, he slid. That golden wave seemed to have a boundless destructive force, and when it collided with the seawater on this side, the seawater on this side was like a boiling pot, instantly boiling. Following the impact of the golden wave, the entire ruins of End seemed to have gone crazy. A big squid happened to swim over, and when it was hit by the golden wave, its body instantly exploded, and it disappeared without a trace. The entire ruins of End was turned upside down, and it was no longer as beautiful as it was before. And Shinjiuli could not care about all of this. This golden wave had the power to destroy everything. One of them thrust his sword toward Shinjiuli's chest, while the other one reached out to grab the red stone in front of Shinjiuli's chest. These three people's martial arts were obviously very good. When the sword pierced down, there was a faint sound of wind and thunder. If this sword pierced through, Shinjiuli would be pierced through by them. "Father!" Shin Yinma shouted. The red stone suddenly flashed, and a ball of pink light burst out from the stone to meet the sword that was piercing down. Bang! The pink light collided with the tip of the sword. The sword was slightly tilted, but the falling posture did not change. It was still going to pierce Shinjiuli's chest. "Father!" Shin Yinma was so anxious that he almost rolled over and used the stone to block it. Chapter 1576. Chi. Just as the tip of the sword was about to stab Shinjiuli's chest, it was caught between two jade-like slender fingers. The assailant was shocked when he saw his lightning-fast sword being caught so easily. He lowered his head to take a look. He saw that Shinjiuli had opened his eyes and was looking at him with a pair of icy blue eyes. He raised one hand lazily and pinched the sword with two fingers. It was like pinching a paper rattledrum. The attacker could not stab an inch further. The other two saw that the situation was not good. They looked at each other and immediately waved their hands. Long swords appeared in their palms. They pointed diagonally and the two long swords turned into 7 or 8 short swords. They shot towards Shinjiuli's acupoints at the same time. They were obviously not kind people. Their attacks were extremely ruthless. Once they met, they would use a fatal move. They obviously wanted to end the battle quickly. No one could enter the fiery golden sea. Even if a metal object fell in, it would melt in an instant. No living creature had appeared for thousands of years. However, this man was able to come out of the sea and preserve his life. Obviously, his martial arts were very profound. The three of them saw that he was unconscious and wanted to take advantage of the situation. They did not expect that he would wake up at the right time. Since both sides had already started fighting, the three of them felt that since they had already offended this person, they might as well take advantage of the fact that he had just climbed out of the sea and was weak. The three of them rarely joined hands to fight, but once they joined hands, they were a very troublesome opponent. There were 7 or 8 short swords. Each of them was shining with a faint blue light. It was obvious that they were also dipped in poison. As long as Shinjioli was scratched by these short swords, he would lose his life. Shinjioli's eyes flashed slightly. He did not say anything and only used a little strength in his fingers. The man whose sword was caught by Shinjioli suddenly screamed. His body was like a spinning top as he spun above Shinjioli and formed a human shield. The 7 or 8 short swords all pierced into the man's body. The man could only let out half a scream before his body went limp. Shinjioli flicked his finger again, and the man flew away along with his sword, which he would rather die than let go of. Coincidentally, he fell into the fiery gold sea beside him. With a cheat sound, the man and his sword were completely melted, without even a splash. The remaining 2 people's faces changed drastically. They obviously knew that they were no match for this person. They no longer cared about anything else and turned to run. They could actually fly. After running 2 steps, they extended their arms and flew up. However, they had only flown 5 or 6 meters when their ribs suddenly went numb. Chapter 1577. What kind of reincarnation was this kid? He was still a fetus, but he could already use his power to protect his father. Although his power was still very weak, it was enough to make Shinjioli happy. This baby was a genius. Shin Yinma blinked. He was very proud of being praised. He proudly raised his small chest and said, "Of course, I am your baby. The angle of your power is not right. Your power is still weak, so it is not suitable for you to fight head-on. You should." Shinjioli took the opportunity to educate him. The 2 people who had fallen on the ground were completely ignored. They looked at the father and son who were talking to each other and were shocked. There was a child hidden in the little stone. It was too strange. This little stone was too magical. If they could offer this little stone to the Devil Master, they would certainly be rewarded greatly. Perhaps they could have a place in the Devil Kingdom. Unfortunately, the 2 people looked regretful at the same time. Where is this? Shinjioli sat on a stone and looked down to ask the 2 people who were still lying on the ground. The 2 people looked at each other and answered, "This is the coast of the fiery gold sea." Shinjioli pondered for a moment. He had a slight impression of this name. Suddenly, another name came to his mind. He asked again, "This is the Celestial Devil Continent?" The 2 people were stunned. They nodded at first, but then shook their heads. A few years ago, this place was called the Celestial Devil Continent. 3 years ago, it changed its name to the Devil Celestial Continent. The Devil Celestial Continent, the Devil Celestial Continent. Shinjioli went through these 4 words in his mind and did not comment. Why did it change its name? Who changed it? The 2 people looked at each other and then looked at Shinjioli together. Are you not from this continent? Shinjioli flicked his sleeves and said indifferently, "Now I am asking you." He had a kind of arrogance, so the 2 people did not dare to provoke him. They could only say, "It was our Devil Master who changed it." Devil Master, this name was also vaguely familiar. Shinjioli's heart skipped a beat. He vaguely felt that the owner of this name had something to do with him. Who is your Devil Master? Is it a boy or a girl? Now, the 2 of them finally understood that Shinjioli was not a person of this world. He didn't even know their famous demon lord. One of them immediately said, "Our Devil Lord is a woman. 3 years ago, she underwent a tribulation and was reborn on this continent." At that time, a red light shone on heaven and earth, moving the rivers and mountains. It alarmed all the immortals, demons, and demons in the world. On the day of her rebirth, tens of thousands of divine birds flew around her, and tens of thousands of beasts prostrated themselves before her. That's right. At that time, the entire demonic god continent. No, the various sects and clans of the demonic immortal continent were all alarmed. They all came to our demonic realm to congratulate us. The banquet lasted a total of 49 days. The two of them were obviously very proud of their devil master. Whenever they talked about her, they would go on and on about her great achievements in the past 3 years. This continent was also divided into 6 realms: immortal, demon, devil, human, ghost and beast. The 6 realms were once somewhat chaotic. Before this devil master came, the immortal realm was the most powerful. The people of the immortal realm often used the pretense of eliminating evil for the people to oppress the demon and demon realms, causing the people of the demon and demon realms to suffer. However, since this devil master was reborn, she had a few fights with several immortals who came to eliminate evil and defend the Tao. Those immortals were scared witless, which greatly intimidated the people of the immortal realm. The immortals of the immortal realm no longer dared to bully the demon realm. The people of the demon realm could finally hold their heads high. Chapter 1578. This Devil Lord was the Lord of all devils, also known as the Devil Lord. She could summon clouds and rain with a flip of her hand. On this continent, she didn't need to fight with anyone. Just the pressure of the pure devil chi on her body was enough to make people lower their heads and submit to her. Even the immortals of the celestial world were extremely afraid of her. They didn't dare to act rashly in front of her and were always respectful. She came to this continent for 3 years and finally changed the devil realm's position in the 6th Tao. Now, the devil realm was the leader of this continent. This devil lord didn't hold back and changed the name of the divine devil continent to the devil immortal continent. Now, other than the celestial world that could compete with the devil realm, the other worlds could only be respectful to her. Because of her appearance, the entire celestial world was shaken. In order to win her over, the celestial world wanted to marry her. The leader of the celestial world, Jade Cloud Emperor, had proposed to her. However, she said that if she wanted to marry the strongest person in the world. She also wanted to marry someone who was unmarried. As for the origin, no matter if it was the celestial world, the demon realm, or the devil realm, as long as their martial arts were high enough to compete with her, she would consider them as her future husband. Although Jade Cloud Emperor's magic power was high, he already had 2 wives and obviously didn't meet this condition. Everyone in the 6 realms wanted to pull her to their side. All kinds of people gathered in the devil realm and participated in the vigorous PK. After a few open and secret competitions, a hermit from the celestial world won. Now, the devil lord and this hermit were close and both sides had reached the stage of discussing marriage. As long as the devil lord married this hermit, it would mean that the devil realm and the celestial world officially joined hands and no longer fought. On this continent, it was mainly these 2 worlds that were fighting fiercely. As long as these 2 worlds stopped fighting, this continent would be much more peaceful. The day after tomorrow was the big day of the devil lord and the hermit from the celestial world. All the people in the 6 realms racked their brains to offer strange things as congratulatory gifts, wanting to leave a good impression on the devil lord. These 3 people were from the devil realm. Their status wasn't high, but they also wanted to give the devil lord a presentable gift. These few days, they had been searching everywhere and just happened to pass by here. Coincidentally, they met Shinjoli, who floated out of the fiery gold sea. The reborn demon lord had a strange habit. She liked children, especially beautiful children. The 2 survivors explained the origin of the devil lord's hobby very clearly. Shinjuli listened in silence, then suddenly asked, "What does your Devil Lord look like?" The two of them had seen the Devil Lord from afar before, so they had a good impression of him. They immediately replied, "She's extremely beautiful and likes to wear red. She looks to be around 13 or 14 years old." Shinjuli's fingertips trembled slightly. Was it her? Could it be her? He paused for a moment. Suddenly, a painting appeared in his hand and he waved it in front of the two people. "Is it like this?" The painting depicted Ning Xuema's appearance when she was dancing in a red dress. After the two of them took a look, they immediately nodded. "She looks right, but our Devil Master isn't that big. She looks very small, and her hairstyle isn't right." Shinjuli didn't say anything. He closed his eyes slightly. When he opened them again, there seemed to be a clear light in his eyes. He looked up and down at the two people. "What gift do you want to give her?" "A beautiful child." The two people nodded cautiously. "We're looking for such a child, but it's not easy to find one." Chapter 1579. There were many beautiful children on this continent, but there were very few who could meet the Devil Lord's requirements. Shinjuli's figure turned slightly, and a white light flashed. The tall and handsome man disappeared, and standing in the same place was an extremely beautiful little boy. He had delicate skin, long eyelashes, and slightly raised corners of his eyes. His eyes were like the sea, and he was wearing a dazzling white robe. His whole person seemed to be made of snow. The two people stared at the little boy dumbfoundedly. Although Shinjuli was small, his aura was not small. He stood there and smiled slightly. Under this smile, it was as if all the flowers in the world had bloomed. "Give me to her." The two people's expressions were as if a pie had suddenly fallen from the sky and hit their heads. They were dizzy and disoriented. You want to give her this gift?" They suddenly thought of something and immediately took a step back. "Do you want to harm our Devil Lord?" "Let us tell you, you better give up on this idea. Our Devil Lord is the only master on this continent, and no one can hurt her. If you dare to harm her, you will be hunted down by all the demons in the Devil realm." Shinjuli's eyes flashed. He flicked his sleeves and said lightly, "Don't worry, your Devil Lord is so powerful, how can I plot against her? I am just curious about her. So I want to go and see." But the two people were still a little uncertain. Shinjuli sighed softly. He waved his sleeves, and the sword turned into two. The cold sword points were pointed at the necks of the two people. "Do you have any objections?" Their lives were hanging under the sword. How could the two people dare not to agree? He had no choice but to agree. However, they were still a little worried. "You really won't harm our Devil Lord?" Shinjuli lowered his sleeves, lowered his eyes, and only replied with two words, "Of course." The two people looked at each other again. If they did not agree now, they would probably die. It would be better to offer him to the Devil Lord. After all, the Devil Lord had many capable people on his side. No matter how high this person's martial arts was, he was just one person. He wouldn't be able to do much. The two of them had already made up their minds, so they happily agreed. They whistled into the air. A moment later, a gorgeous carriage descended from the sky and landed in front of Shinjuli. "Please." Shinjuli wasn't polite. He turned around and boarded the carriage. As soon as he sat down, a series of rustling sounds came from outside. The originally wooden carriage was suddenly surrounded by iron plates, sealing the entire carriage tightly. The iron plates also had a variety of flowing charms, which looked rather strange and gaudy. Outside the carriage came the laughter of the two people. "Sorry, since you insist on making this gift, then you have to follow our procedures. This carriage is specially made, and it can seal all the power in your body. If you obediently make the gift, then it will be fine. If you use your power to resist, this carriage will become a purgatory of fire, and your whole body will be burned. Don't blame us for not reminding you. Shinjoli's expression didn't change at all. He just used a small cleaning spell to clean the carriage, and then sat down with peace of mind. His sleeves trembled, and the little red stone poked its head out. Suddenly, it saw Shinjoli's current appearance. Shin Yinma's whole body was stunned. He was stunned for a moment, and then jumped out 3 words, brother. Brother. Shinjoli was speechless. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.